Kevin Durso covers the Flyers for 97.3 ESPN.com. He was busy over the weekend. You know, everybody was watching the LeBron stuff.
This was the first big move of free agency over the weekend.
It really was.
Caught my attention. Holy cow.
As the Flyers have brought back James Van Riemsdyk, and he will fit nicely, Pete Thompson says, on that left wing. But where will they use him? How will they use him? We'll bring in Kevin Durso now here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline to take a little closer look at the deal for JVR back at Philly. What's going on, Kevin?
Not much.
Well, JVR's back. I mean, it's a guy with over 30 goals, 36 goals last year. Obviously, they add a little offensive punch here. So, on the surface, do we like the deal to get JVR back in Philly?
I think you definitely like the deal, just because of the fact that you're trying to make some noise here. You need to try to be an impact team and turn into a contender soon. And it's one of those moves that really moves the needles and gets people interested and gets people excited about this team as soon as next year, instead of talking about draft prospects.
So JVR back, Kevin. How do you see him slotting in? Mike was just asking about that. I mean, I've all last season I thought it was like left wing by committee. How would you like to play left wing tonight, as they had so many centers that they kept moving over to the left wing, including Claude Giroux? How do you see him shaking out? Top line, second line, power play? What do you see JVR's role as?
Definitely power play, just because he was so successful there with Toronto throughout the years of his time there. But you look at the actual line structure for the forwards, it's going to be probably, I don't think you do anything to the top line. I like that Couturier, Giroux, Konechny kind of feeling there and letting that play out. The rest, I go down to the second line. I think JVR fits really well alongside a Nolan Patrick. I think he fits well with a guy like Jake Voracek. These are two guys who are known to set people up, and you got a finisher now. And that makes you have two really balanced lines that can score. It's what people have been clamoring about. They want to get a guy who can score and who can be that guy who finishes. And you've got one now with a guy like JVR.
Of course, proven now since he left. I mean, that was the worst trades in Flyers history. I think it's funny that in the comments for him coming back, one of the people they sought out was club president Paul Holmgren. And his quote was, "Oh, he's matured physically over the last couple of years." Yeah, man, what'd you deal him away for in the first place?
Yeah, and it just so happened that this free agent class wasn't one of the best ones. He was one of the top players available, and that's why it's such a significant move, because you're actually adding a big name. This is the first time we've seen Ron Hextall make a big splash in free agency, and I think this is the first year of his tenure as GM where we can say free agency was probably a more significant week for him or weekend for him than the draft was. That's not taking away from his draft class. It's just saying that you really made an impact this time and this year with the free agency class, and that makes a big difference to a lot of fans who want to see this team take a step forward.
Yeah, I know that he wanted to make more moves, and his comments coming out of the draft were he was surprised that there weren't more moves that were able to be made, but then this move was made. Now, Mike texted me immediately, Kevin, when the move was announced that James Van Riemsdyk was coming back to the Flyers. We're talking with Kevin Durso, our 97.3 ESPN Flyers insider, about Wayne Simmons and his future, and I think Hextall made some comments saying that one doesn't necessarily affect the other. Do you believe that?
I can't say I do for sure. I don't see how you're going to have two forwards that are very similar makeup. JVR is a little bit better at the 5-on-5 side, but they're both that power play, net front presence. And I don't think there's a fit for two guys like that. Not to mention you've had Nolan Patrick play that spot too on the power play too. So that's too many guys kind of factoring into it.
And I do know, and I talk about the number of centers that they had up and down the roster, but one of the areas I think that, if I'm not mistaken, Hextall was disappointed they weren't able to address was like a third-line center. Do you think that could be Morgan Frost?
There's a possibility. It's probably a slim possibility. He's put on a good amount of muscle in the last year, but he still, by Ron Hextall's evaluation, still needs to add a little bit of size. The production he had in juniors this past year was tremendous, and there's no taking away from that. But he's got to still show that he can be that player skill-wise, and also have the physical qualities to be a third-line center. There's a lot of responsibility that still goes into a middle six role.
Hey, Kevin, obviously JVR, now 54 points. He scored 36 goals. It's still a far cry off of the 102 that Claude Giroux had. So do they still need to add more offensive firepower, do you think? What is the next move that they need to kind of target?
Well, we kind of touched on the third-line center, and they wanted to try to add a right-handed defenseman or defensive depth. That's probably the two target areas at this point. You've got a really good top six now. There's no taking away from that, and you've got scoring potential on there. You need Sean Couturier and Travis Konechny to repeat their seasons from a year ago and be those kind of point producers. Claude Giroux obviously fits into that as well. He's not maybe not at the 100-point mark or anything like that, but you want him to be a top scorer. You need him to be one of your top point producers on your team. And everybody else has to fall in line after that. You know, the third line, the fourth line. You know, fourth line's not going to contribute a ton, but you need guys who still drive the play. They didn't have that a year ago, and you want guys who can drive the play. I understand why Hextall didn't add in that area. Everybody's getting 3-4 year deals in some cases, and you don't want to lock yourself down too far down the road with prospects you've got. So you could look into it. You could look into it, and we'll see what happens. I mean, he said we'll see a lot with prospects and things of that nature. So it's a waiting game right now.
We'll see. When parents say that to their kids, that usually means no. Kevin Durso with us. So about $15 million left they have in cap space. They still need to sign 4 or 5 players. Does that mean the goaltending then just stays status quo? It's Elliott and who?
It probably does stay close to status quo. It just depends on if Michael Neuvirth's the backup or if Alex Lyon is the backup. And I think Neuvirth will be around as long as they don't find a trading partner for him or something like that. I think they'd like to get Lyon into that role, but there's not a clear path to that. And I think that they're waiting for Carter Hart at this point. They're waiting for him to get to the AHL level, get some time under his belt professionally, and be that player that, at the AHL level anyway, that they think he can be, and then the NHL will soon follow.
Kevin Durso with us, our 97.3 ESPN Flyers insider. So the Flyers making the big move over the weekend. James Van Riemsdyk back. Any other guys that aren't coming back that Hextall talked about, or guys that have left the fold or they're still interested in trying to give qualifying offers to, stuff like that?
Well, they have qualifying offers out to a few players. Robert Haig's got to sign a deal. Lyon's one of those guys, too, who has to sign a deal. That's probably not going to be anything significant in terms of cap space. They're so young in their NHL careers at this point that it'll be fairly affordable for them. In terms of offers, they managed to shed a lot of the dead weight that they had going on. Valtteri Filppula signed with the Islanders. Brandon Manning signed with Chicago. Peter Mrazek left and went to Carolina so they don't lose another third-round pick. It's things like that. So they've managed to shed a lot of dead weight, and they've left themselves with maybe more room for competition in training camp than they have in previous years, which is certainly a good thing. You want to start to see the prospects make their way into the fold, and you're definitely going to see competition at training camp come September.
All right, JVR is back. We'll see how he fits in. And what's next for Ron Hextall? You wrote, Kevin, at 973ESPN.com that this kind of signals that there could be other big moves on the way, that they're finally ready to kind of get off their own little process, if you will, because he said, hey, we've been going with young players and drafting these guys for 4 years, but is this a sign that they're ready for the next step?
It should be, for sure. The fact that I think we went into free agency and a lot of people were looking for the depth players. They need a third-line center. They need a depth defenseman. And it was going to be one of those years that could turn out to be like other years that Ron Hextall's had in free agency, where the top name that you come out of free agency with is somebody like Dale Weiss or somebody like that. And he's a guy who's been sitting in the press box more than he's been on the ice. So for them to go out and sign a player not only of JVR's caliber and the fit that he has, but the fact that he was probably one of the top 5 free agents in the class this year. And that's a statement that says we're ready to make a play for the bigger names. Yeah, it's not John Tavares and it's not John Carlson, and in some cases you're not going to get opportunities for those players. Hextall even said, teams that have good players want to keep their players, and that's understandable. So they might not be ready to make that play for a guy like John Tavares and get a franchise-changing player in some ways, but you're making strides towards being a player for top names and being a destination, and that's a good step to take at this time, given where you finished last year and what your expectations are with all the kids coming up soon.
All right, Kevin Durso has more on the Flyers at 97.3ESPN.com. He's at Kevin_Durso on Twitter, and the Flyers bring in JVR. We'll see what's next. Keep it locked. And Kevin's coverage has been outstanding at 97.3ESPN.com. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.